Hi, welcome to Enlightened Empaths with Samantha and Denise. Tonight we're going to be talking about Finding Your True Voice Part 2, and I'll have the opportunity to talk with Samantha and find out about her path. The premise of this show and what we love to do, we're both psychic mediums, intuitive mediums if you prefer that, and we're hoping to use this venue to help people connect and find their own inner light and knowing, and to validate that your empathic abilities and sensitivities. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, how are you all doing?
Okay, are you ready to jump in?
I am ready to jump in.
Okay, so as you know from previous shows, Samantha and I met in New Jersey. We were at a workshop with Joan Holland, and I would absolutely love to hear how you started on this path. If it was something that started when you were a child, later in life, when you started to wake up and realize that you truly are as empathic as you are.
Well, I think it was kind of a slow journey. I love that now in today's day and age, it's really cool to be psychic. I love that because I felt, and I don't know if you felt this way, but growing up, that was something that was weird or strange or just
Hmm.
not talked about. Um,
Excuse me.
my mom would always say that she was psychic, and she was. Like, she would know stuff all the time growing up about us, and it freaked me out. Again, I didn't find it fascinating. Like, she would give us 50 cents every day to buy white milk at school with our lunch. Like, we brought our lunch, and then she'd give us 50 cents and say, buy the white milk. I don't want you drinking chocolate milk. You don't need the sugar.
Hmm.
And every time, like always, like once a week, I'd sneak and get the chocolate milk. And the one day that I would do that, I'd come home and she'd say, "You drank chocolate milk today, didn't you?" So psychic stuff like never really excited me. It always scared me. I remember my first crush was on a boy named Gray Tiller. And I was, I think, in the sixth grade. And I came home and she was like, "You have a crush on a new boy, don't you?" Like, she just knew stuff that I didn't want her to know. And so I was like, ugh, this is not cool. And it kind of, for me personally, I grew up, seeing spirits now and then, not on a constant basis. I'm not claiming to be that kid from that movie that I saw dead people all the time, but I would see things, I would sense things. And again, it was never like, wow, look at me, that's so cool. It was always scary. So I definitely worked hard to shut it down. I mean, literally, the last spirit I saw with my physical eyes, I was 16, and I spent most of the evening on my knees next to my bed praying to God that to shut that down, that would never
You,
happen again.
that is a really really good point, and I think because it scared me too. It really used to freak me out, and even if you grow up this way and you're sensitive and you're empathic, all of a sudden when you start realizing there's someone else in the room or picking up on things, it's very unsettling.
It
And
is.
prayer was a big part for me as well.
Well, and
So how did you move past that?
um, well, it took a long time, but what really happened was it's kind of a weird journey, and I've told it before on my other podcast, so I don't want to bore any old listeners, but for new listeners, I'll summarize it quickly. I was an English teacher at my local community college, and I was dealing with a really creepy student who was basically stalking me, and not in a like "isn't she cute" way, in a like "I'm going to find your house and harm you" way,
Ooh,
because he
ooh.
wasn't happy with a grade I gave him. Um, I went to my department chair for help. It was a class I taught that was about a block from the main campus at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday Thursday class, and that's a really tricky time to be on campus because most everybody is gone. And there was like one 89-year-old security guard, so I was terrified.
Oh, mhm.
Um, anyway, one day I walked into my office and there was a red kidney-shaped rock on my desk. And, I had never purchased a rock. It was red and shiny and nice, but I'm a very, very clean person. I always keep my office immaculate. I knew I didn't leave it there. I was fairly certain housekeeping wasn't giving me tips, so I thought, where did this come from? And we have a wonderful geology professor named Phil Garwood, but everyone calls him Dr. Rocks. So I went up to his office and I said, Dr. Rocks, I found this stone in my office. Like, what do I do? And he said, wow, who do you need protection from?
Oh,
And, I hadn't told anybody except my department chair because it's kind of a weird thing to walk around and talk
yeah.
about. And I said, well, actually, I do have this student who's kind of freaking me out. And he said, well, that's Jasper and it will protect you. And I really respected this man. I really like him. He's just very funny and kind, and the students just love him. And
Right.
so I knew he was a very, very smart man. And I just looked at him and I said, "A rock can do that?" And he said, "Yeah, it can. Keep it in your pocket." And I was like, "Okay, Dr. Rocks." And I just kind of walked away and thought, what the heck is going on? So, but I did it. I kept it in my pocket. And that weekend, the student was arrested for trying to set a golf course on fire and never came back to school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long ago was this?
That was like 2002 or 3.
Okay. So really, relatively speaking, not that long ago.
No, no.
Okay.
I was married. I had 2 young kids. I was a full-time teacher. I
Did
was
you
in
ever
my
figure out where
30s.
the
Like
rock
I
came from?
no,
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm
no,
just so interested in this.
no. And I still have that rock.
Wow. So that was the preface to all the crystal stuff?
That was it. Yep. Yep.
Holy moly. Almost said the other one. That's incredible.
Yeah, it
So
was.
then from there,
So from
because
there,
this is fun.
I started getting like addicted to rocks. I went to this I went to my massage therapist, and at her little register, she had a bag of Lucky Rocks. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to get a bag. Who wouldn't like a bag of Lucky Rocks?" So I got that. And again at the community college, they're always building. Like if my community college gets one extra dollar, do they give it to the teachers or the students? No, ma'am. No. They build brand new buildings all the time. So they had killed our parking lot to build a new building. So we literally had to park with the students like 18 miles away and cross this bridge. It was ridiculous. I hated it. And so we were always fighting and competing for parking spaces. So I would drive to school and I'd hold my bag of Lucky Rocks and I'd go, please give me a parking space. Because if any of you, I think everyone can agree, the minute you start reading metaphysical stuff, whether it's Doreen Virtue or, The Secret or Wayne Dyer, what's the first thing they tell you to manifest? A parking spot.
A parking, right.
Which
And
I
it
don't know why
works.
that became like, and it works. So I'd hold
It
this bag of
does.
Lucky Rocks and I would always get like the one spot everyone fought over. It was so weird. Again, placebo or these little rocks doing something, I don't know. So
Doesn't
it
matter.
doesn't matter. So I started getting really into rocks, and no one else around me was. And this randomly, I mean, I've lived in this town for a long time. We do not have metaphysical or spiritual stuff here, but randomly this one year there was a metaphysical show that came to our town, and so I begged my dad to come with me. And just to have someone to walk around with. And I remember I took $40. That was my. I had to put like caps on myself for what I would spend on
Yes.
rocks. So I'm walking
Uh-huh.
around and I'm looking at all these stones and I'm in heaven. And this woman just walks up. She was a psychic from Iowa. And she
Oh.
walks up to my dad and she gives him this like spot on reading. And
Mhm.
my dad is an Irish Catholic, but if he could, he would be a wasp. Like he I grew up with him wearing ascots and smoking jackets. Like I'm not even kidding. He's just a very like proper, dignified gentleman, and he does not show emotion. And he started to cry because she was bringing through his
Wow.
dad, and I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna step away from this emotional scene because I knew that would embarrass him even more." So I just kind of stepped away, and she called over his shoulder and goes, "Don't you go anywhere. I have a message for you too." And I was like,
Ooh.
"Oh, okay." So I just kind of hovered and they finished and my dad hugged her, which is, another miracle.
Right. For someone who's not
Yeah.
demonstrative. That was a huge deal.
So she comes up to me and she says, my guides are telling me that you're a healer. You have this beautiful light coming off of you, and you're a healer. Well, I had no interest in being a healer, and I said, thank you so much, and thank you so much for what you said to my dad. And she said, no, you're not listening to me. You have to go get Reiki. And I was
Oh,
like, Ray, what is that? And she said, it's a form of healing. And I said, I've never heard of this. And she said, wow, you're really new to this, aren't you? And so she wrote down the word Reiki, and I thought, okay. So I Googled around my town and I found a Reiki teacher, and she said, I'm actually teaching a class at the end of the month. I only do it once a year, and this one's coming up. And I thought, okay. And it was $150 for that first class, which was a lot of money for me to spend on myself with, my husband at the time was a police officer. I was a community college teacher. Like, we weren't rolling in it. And for me to spend that money on myself for something I couldn't even tell you what it was. Do you know what I mean? It was
right.
really weird for me, but I did it. And there were just four of us in the class, and I really loved the teacher. She was wonderful, and I became enmeshed in this idea of healing people and feeling the energy coming out of my hands, and it was very, very life changing. And so what she had us do was, she said, you have to meditate every day for 21 days after you receive a Reiki attunement to allow the energy to work through you. She explained it like
Hmm.
Drano. Like, like the Reiki energy is going to be cleaning out everything that's clogged you up, and that you have to do it for 21 days to properly clean you so that you can be a pure vessel of light, so that you can be the healer you're supposed to be. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but
I
wow.
know.
Okay.
So here I am. At the time, my kids were 3 and 20 months. And and I'm working and I'm reading all this stuff, and I somehow found time to meditate every night, and while doing the Reiki positions on me. And so I'm doing that, and I had this really, really, really good friend named George who died from colon cancer. He's the one who came through when we met at the workshop. Do you remember that woman brought him through?
Yes,
Okay, that's
and
George.
with the song, there
Yes,
was a song involved with him. Okay,
yes, yes. He's just this amazing, beautiful soul, and he was just a.
we love
We
George.
love George. And he had died in the late 1997. And so I'm meditating, and I see him, like, in my eye, not with
Oh,
my physical eye.
right.
And I'm like, well, isn't that wishful thinking, Samantha? I wish I could see George. But then he showed me three things to show my sister, because he's my sister's husband's nephew. I don't want to get too confusing,
Hmm.
but anyway.
Right.
So I called my sister the next day and showed her those three things, and she said, that's George, and you couldn't have known that. And I was like, what the
Wow.
heck is going on? So the next night I meditated, and he came through again. And he said, I have to tell you about something. And I said, what? And all he showed me was a bullet hitting someone's neck, and that person grabbing their neck and blood coming out. And I said, what's going on? What are you trying to tell me? And I think I panicked that I shut down the communication, because every night after that, I would meditate, and that's all I would see. Now, George, my sister's husband's family is from Zimbabwe, Africa. And Zimbabwe is run
Oh,
by one of the top 50 worst dictators in the world, a man named Mugabe. And he inflicts awful things on his people. And George's dad runs one of the only grocery stores in all of Zimbabwe, and they're constantly being robbed, and nothing happens. And so I really thought George was trying to tell me that something was going to happen to his family. And
hmm.
they are,
Well, that makes
yeah,
sense.
and they are Greek Orthodox, and the loss from him was not that long ago. And I thought, so I called my sister, I called my best friend. I'm like, how am I going if this is even true, like, if I actually am doing this, how am I going to call these people up and say, I think one of you is going to get shot in the neck? Like, it just sent me into a tailspin. Again, I wasn't sitting there going, isn't this cool? Look at me. I was freaking out. Meanwhile, it was July of 2005, and I took my kids to the beach every morning, after morning nap time. And every day this month, I'm finding heart-shaped seashells on the beach. I should post a picture on Instagram, because what I did was I took all those heart-shaped shells I found that summer and I glued them onto this linen in a heart shape, and I framed it in my home just so I can remember how many heart-shaped shells I found that summer. And so I just started to think something's coming for me. I don't know that this is for George. Like, this is feeling personal. So I kept trying to get to it and I couldn't. Long story short, my husband, at the time, the police officer, was shot in the neck on July 29th
Oh
of
my goodness.
2005. And it was really bad. Like, he was in a coma for the rest of the summer, and nobody thought he was going to live. You know, the doctors were like, he's not going to live the night. So Monsignor Matt came in and gave him last rites. And I remember Monsignor's walking out of the room next to the ICU in the hospital. Do you know what they call it? The bereavement room.
What? Oh,
That's the
oh, I
label.
didn't know
I
that.
know. Like, I'm like, people have hope.
Oh.
So I'm sitting in the bereavement room, and he said to me, "Don't worry, Samantha, the church will cover the cost of the funeral." So it was bad, but he survived. Um, long road to recovery. But what that did for me is I remember sitting there with my sister and my two good friends, and they in that little bereavement room, and they said, "Samantha, you dreamt this. George showed you this. You dreamt this. You saw it in meditation. Like, there's something to that." And so I went to the little chapel in the hospital one of those nights, and I just said, "God, if this is what you want me to do, I will do it, but you must make that man live."
Oh, Willie's from head to toe.
And at the time, he was shot July 29th. August 4th, I found out I was pregnant with Chloe, my youngest. And so I just needed him to live. Do you know, like, I was like, I'm not raising these kids on my own. Like, I loved that man. I was like, I'm not doing this on my own. So that was the deal I struck with God. I said, I will do this, but you must make him live. And so, but despite every odd given by every, doctor, he did survive. Um, he has an anoxic brain injury today, so there are a lot of repercussions, but he's still alive and able to help me parent our kids, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Which two things. I mean, not only the amazing synchronicity of all of your whole story is just talk about spirit giving you a silver platter and saying, "Okay, this is what we're doing. Put what you need on the tray." But the other piece that really struck me was how quickly it, like, someone flipped the light switch and there was no way you could deny that this was your path, because they really opened the floodgates and said, "Okay, dreams, meditation, the synchronicity of being at that first rock show, metaphysical show, and having that psychic from the Midwest approach you and your father." I mean, this is so divinely orchestrated. It's beautiful.
I know it was really intense. Well, that year, that 2005, that was a really intense year for me, because my whole life was just nothing. I mean, he was in rehab for like 6 months. So my whole life was just taking care of these kids, taking care of my pregnancy, and taking care of his almost daily doctor's appointments. And then dealing with
Mm-hmm.
workers' comp, which, if anyone has had to deal with that, oh. At the time that he was shot, the city allowed for injured officers to be paid for 21 days. And on day
Oh,
22,
that's
we went
terrible.
down to 44% pay. And I had to quit my teaching job.
Wow.
So, the city, the residents of my town started doing fundraisers for us. They put on golf benefits,
Oh.
car washes, Hooters. Like, I'm such a feminist. You will never see me in a Hooters. Yet I love Hooters, because they would do these huge lunches and all proceeds would go to us. And it
Oh.
was wonderful. And
Oh.
it enabled me to stay home for a year with my kids and focus on healing. It was just great. I love this town because of that.
Okay, and two things pop in on that. But I had written a note when you were talking of making a commitment to be of service. And when you said if this is what you want me to do, point me in the right direction. And all the resources that you needed came, the support you needed came. And that's another whole thing of when you don't fight the current with this kind of a work, or this kind of, I don't like to call it a calling. I don't, I don't know, that always,
Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
know
like to
why
call
it
it a
sounds
calling, and
weird.
I don't like to call it a gift.
No, I don't
It
either.
comes out of my
It's not a
mouth
gift.
sometimes, but it's not what I like to call it.
Me too. And when people say, "Oh, you're so gifted," I say, "No, I'm not. I get out of the way and the messages come through." But just the fact that you truly were in such a vulnerable place, and having lost your friend and having come to you in spirit, having your husband, pretty much, well, it's a miracle that he didn't pass. But when you truly opened your heart and soul to the universe, to God, to all that is, and you said, okay, here I am, what do you want me to do? The synchronicity and how easily this flowed together, and I'm sure at the time it didn't feel easy. It probably felt like, oh my God, how the hell am I going to pull this off?
Yeah, it
So,
did. It felt
very,
exciting and exhilarating and scary in the next moment. But Denise, I wonder if that vulnerability is a part of like a pathway for all of us to open up, because it's funny, one thing that I always tell my friends that awful and wonderful year taught me is how wonderful it is to drop the illusion of perfection. Like before Mike's shooting, I was very invested in presenting a perfect outlook. And I didn't even, if you had asked me in 2002 or 3 or 4 if that were true, I would say, no, I'm the realest person you could meet. But it wasn't true. Like I wanted everybody to know that my house always looked great, I always looked great, my children always looked great, my marriage was perfect. And when the shooting happened, I was like, none of that matters. None of that matters. And there was such a freedom in that. When he was in the
and what I
hospital, I had
found,
people coming in and out of my house to help take care of the kids. And that first week, my thought was, oh, thank God my house is clean. Like, whereas now, like, I don't give a crap about that. So I think something about that vulnerability can help us awaken to our purpose or calling, whatever it may be.
okay, that vulnerability, and also how many people who are doing this work or who are deeply empathic have had situations or circumstances in their life that were so potentially debilitating, but you had to get strong enough to get through that. And I always look at that as coming on the other side of it. It gives you an empathy and compassion and understanding for where people are when they're in crisis,
Yes, yes. And you can't do this
which is
work without
huge.
that. You really
Right.
can't. So after that year, what happened was I started having these incredibly vivid dreams, and I have not been able to have dreams like this since, and I don't know what that is, but I feel as though, and please, y'all do not judge me and think I'm crazy. I feel as though I spent this year in some type of psychic training school. Because what would happen, the first thing that happened was I woke up one night and there was this man in my room, but I was dreaming. Do you ever have dreams that are so real, but you know you're dreaming, but you're still in your room?
Yes, lucid dreaming. Yes.
Yeah, I guess that is lucid dreaming. So there was this older cowboy type man named Red in my room, and he said, hey, are you cool with this? Are you comfortable? Are you scared? Because this is the dream state, so nothing scary, right? And I said, no, I'm not scared.
Wow.
And he said, okay. And he said, do you want to see how I died? And I said, okay, sure. So he said, hold my hand. And I was able to witness the last like 30 minutes of his life. And then we were back in my bedroom, and he said, that wasn't so scary, was it? And I said, no, not at all. And he said, do you want to meet some of my friends? And I said, okay. So we walk out of my room into my kitchen, and my kitchen is filled with all these people. And all they wanted to do, they wanted me to hold their hand and show me how they died, how they spent their last few minutes on Earth.
Oh my
And so I
goodness.
did that. I witnessed that moment for all of them. And then Red walked me back into my bedroom, tucked me in. He was like a little grandfather. He was dressed like a cowboy, he
Mm-hmm.
had like the red baseball cap on. And he said, we've been trying to come to you for years for help. Are you ready now? And I
Oh.
said, yes, I think I am. I said, as long as it's in the dream state. because
Oh, that makes me want to
I
cry.
was still
Oh.
scared. So then I started having these dreams, and it was so crazy because every night I would remember snippets, but there would be a person standing outside of a classroom with a clipboard, and I would walk up and I would say Samantha Faye, and they'd check me in. And there was another girl who was pregnant like I was, and then there was this guy. I think his name was John or Jim, a young guy, like in his 20s, really, really nice. And the three of us were just kind of buddies, and we would always sit together. And every night in my dream, it was a different topic. Like one night we'd learn about astral work, and then the other night we'd learn about using your light, and another night we'd learn about dealing with negative forces. And I would wake up and I would remember. Like there was this one dream where the teacher like literally appeared as different scary things, and we had to pull light from the palms of our hand and pull light from our heart chakra and throw it at the dark energy until we
Ooh.
overcame it with light. It was really amazing. So almost every night I'm having these dreams. Meanwhile, there's this woman, and I still don't know who she is. I know her name is Barbara, but I don't know where she lives. But every month she would she would mail me cards, praying for you and your husband and your family. Hope he's recovering. I know what it's like to be a caretaker, so please remember to take care of you. And she would always include like $20 in the card. And she would say in there, like, go get your nails done, or, like go splurge on something fun for yourself. It was just
Mm-hmm.
so lovely. So one time, like this is like maybe let me think a second. Chloe had not been born. So and she was born in April of 2006. I was very pregnant, so I can't remember it had to have been early 2006. My Reiki teacher called and said, I'm doing a Reiki 2 class. Do you want to come? And I was like, yes, because my dream was to do Reiki, have a Reiki attunement when I was pregnant. Because I had read in all my
Mm-hmm.
Reiki books that if you're pregnant and you get Reiki, the baby is born as a little Reiki person.
Well, that
I
makes
know, and I
sense.
loved that idea. So I was like, yes. And she said, great, it's $300. Well, I'm not working. My husband isn't working. We're living off, the money that this lovely town has raised for us. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. That woman, Barbara, so I said to God again, I'm like, if you want me to do this Reiki 2 class, you've got to provide the money. And good
Mm-hmm.
luck with that, mister. And that week, Barbara, who had been sending me like $20 a month, sent me 3 $100 bills.
Oh my
And said,
goodness.
please
And
use this to do something for you.
and that is so that's how the law of attraction really works when you surrender, when you let go, when you do the work. And that's okay. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going because this
No,
is
no, you're
fascinating.
right. I think that's the power of surrender. And so, again, I still felt selfish, like spending $300 in 2006 on me, hiring a babysitter to watch my other two kids because my husband at the time wasn't capable of that. I mean, it was just a big step for me. But I did it. I had a great time. I loved Reiki. If any of you have gotten Reiki 1 and walked away and was like, I don't know if that was for me, please try Reiki 2 because that kicks it up to a whole new level. I learned about all the ancient symbols. I learned how to do distant healing. I learned that you can, with Reiki, well, really with anything, you can intentionally send healing energy into a past event and it will affect you in the present. You can send Reiki into the future and it will affect an event in the future. So I was so tuned in and turned on by Reiki 2. I loved it. So I started doing that.
You know what I love about when you were talking about dreaming and dream school, and which I think is absolutely fascinating in the sense of it's because I do believe everything is energetic, and there are different frequencies that we resonate at. That's why we can be mediums, because that's the way it works. It's all energy. But I was thinking about you triggered that part in your brain, but isn't that the same thing with the Reiki as far as being in a different vibrational pattern and
Yes.
tapping into that divine? And I
Yes.
love that.
It's yes. Yes. You put things so
But at this
succinctly,
time,
Denise.
But at that time, you didn't have a community. You didn't have a community of like-minded people to support you
Not
with
at
this.
all. Nope.
Okay, and I think that's a huge
Yeah.
part because that's where a lot of people are right now that are probably listening are, okay, I'm feeling all this stuff, I'm waking up, all of a sudden I'm sensing things, what am I supposed to do with it? So this is perfect. Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't have the community, and meanwhile, like weird stuff is happening. For example, I was driving my kids to preschool one day in 2006, and um well, first I woke up that morning in the shower, and I felt like that Arquette girl from that show, The Medium, because this song was screaming in my head from the minute I was woke up, and it was Johnny Be Good. Not a
Mm-hmm.
song I personally really like a whole lot, and it's just screaming in my head. And I'm driving down the road, and I it's like a hologram. It was the weirdest thing. I saw a man that looked just like my brother-in-law, again, my sister's husband, projected in front of me. And I was like, "What the heck is going on?" Now this was October 21st of 2006, and I'll tell you why I remember that in a minute. So all day I'm hearing Johnny Be Good. I'm seeing this man that looks exactly like my brother-in-law, and I'm like, after the last time I got a visual, I thought I better pass this on. So I called my sister and I said, I don't know what's going on, but these are the two things that are happening. And my sister got very emotional and she said, do you remember I told you that, Peter's older brother committed suicide in the 1960s? And I said, yes, but you guys never talk about it. And she said, well, his name was Johnny, and today's his birthday.
Oh, Willie's from head to
Well,
toe. Ooh.
October 25th is my daughter Tori's birthday. And so my sister said, I never wanted to tell you that was his birthday because personally, I feel so sad that there's so much shame around suicide, you know? Um,
That's why I always, when I'm working with someone or talking, I say, did they
that's
choose
what
to
I
leave? Because I
say.
do think for many, yeah, and that's huge because it's a choice and it's not something to be judged or denigrated or because someone is in that much pain that they choose to go. We need to respect
Oh
that.
my gosh, that's so
My
funny.
own personal
Me
insight on that.
too. Me too. That's we have the
Yeah.
same terminology. Well, I know I mentioned Robin Williams the last time we talked, so I promise I'm not like a huge Robin Williams fan, but I love him. But one person after he chose to leave said, rather than denigrating him for, you know, exiting this way, I think we should give him courage for staying as long as he did.
Exactly. And there are so many people and I think that this is just as an aside for so many people who are empathic, who are sensitive, who are psychic. There's a very fine line between being overwhelmed, feeling depression, feeling anxiety. And for a lot of highly sensitive people, I truly, truly do believe that that it just becomes too
Yes.
much.
Yes. Especially if you're like Atlas carrying the weight of everybody's emotions on your back and you're not aware that you're doing that. And
Exactly.
that's why I hope this
Exactly.
show can help people realize, what's happening with their
You're not
emotions.
alone.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And that people understand.
so I told my sister this, and the minute she said his name was, Johnny, which I know I must have known. It's just this family never spoke of this. And my sister is 7 years older than me, and her husband is 10 years older than her, and he's the youngest of six. So Johnny passed a long, long time ago. Do you know what I mean? It's like way before my time. So anyway, as soon as she said that, I started getting information from Johnny. He started speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he said was, tell my mother that her prayers got me out of the stuck place.
Oh.
And I don't know exactly what that meant, but I passed that on. And he said, and tell my mother that we're preparing a place for her in heaven. So Courtney's mother-in-law was living in a nursing home at this point, but she had COPD, but was doing very well with it. Courtney, that day, brought her flowers, went to see her, told her what happened, which is very brave of her because, again, Greek Orthodox family, not open to this. And
Right.
her mother started to cry and said, every day since the day he passed, she showed her, she's got this altar. It's the only way I can describe it. It's like, picture a little vanity table, and instead of makeup and brushes, she had this huge picture of Johnny and little pictures of him around it, and all these the saint candles and this little votive in front of his picture. And underneath the vanity was a cardboard box filled with votive candles, the little replacement things. And she said, every morning since the day he's passed, I have lit a candle and prayed for his soul.
Oh.
And so that was October 21st. She passed October 26th.
Wow.
So that was really
But
amazing.
you gave her peace. You gave her peace that she knew it was okay and that she had done her job and could leave.
And that her son was going to be there to greet her, because he was most surely
Right.
in the good place, not in the scary
And
place
I
that a lot of people
right,
are
but I
told to
do
believe in.
I think that she needed to know that. She needed to know that he was okay before she could go. Um,
Yeah, I do too.
that's
So that
fascinating.
was really
Ooh.
interesting. So then I went to the metaphysical store and I signed up for intuitive development classes. And again, I am not a person to go anywhere by myself. I mean, I had to ask my daddy to come with me to the crystal show, I couldn't even think of anybody I could ask to go to this intuitive development class. And I go, it's this little old house that they've converted into the store, and I walk in, and the first person I saw was one of my students. And if any of you are
Oh
teachers,
my
you know
goodness.
the horror of that.
Right.
But it's a community college, so it's not like she was a 17-year-old. She was 25, and she was adorable and sweet, and we hugged, and I don't know, I felt at home right away. I felt like I had come home. I felt welcome. I felt included. I felt safe. And so I went.
And I think I just have to pop in for a second. I think a huge part of that is on some level, you knew it was okay to be fully yourself there.
Yes. Yes, I didn't feel the inhibitions. Have you heard that phrase imposter syndrome? How most
Yes.
of us walk around, excuse me, feeling that we are imposters. I felt like an imposter every day that I taught at that community college, because here's a secret I don't think any English teacher should ever admit. I don't really like the classics. I really don't. I find most of the language dry and boring. I find the stories fairly predictive.
And, and it doesn't instill a love of literature and writing
No,
and English and
no.
words. No, for some folks it does. There's a rare, I work with a man who every once in a while he'll just quote something from, Shakespeare's second act and he'll verbatim and he'll roll into it, or he'll bring up something from, he'll just, and I say, how do you remember that? And he says, because I love it. And I've always kind of tilted my head like a lab and looked at him like, huh, you really do, don't you? So
You're not making that shit up. Oh, well, how about that?
So, as an English teacher, here's your student. You're in this class with the intuitive
Yes,
development.
and so
You feel at home.
I love it, and I started going every other Friday night. The teacher was a little different. Like, there were some of us, we were good. Like, I mean, really, I have to say, like, there was a good core group of us where we were getting some amazing hits. I mean, there was some woman in there where I was like, look at you. And the teacher would be like, thank you. Monica, would you like to share? And I'm like, holy cow, lady, she just brought through that guy's brother-in-law who passed away when she was 7 and knew that, she just bought new shoes today. Can we pause a moment and look
Right.
at, and she was always like, thank you for sharing. So after,
But she never validated for
nope,
people that they were getting the hits.
no.
Oh, see, I'm not a fan of
No,
that.
she was
I am
very
not a
nice. She
fan of
was an incredible teacher. I mean, she taught us how to open our energy, how to work with it. I mean, she was great. I'm just a very insecure person, and I need someone to pat me on the back a lot. And
Okay, and also if we rewind the tape back to that time, so this is
yeah,
2006. things weren't as mainstream as they are right now. So, and you've already mentioned you were in an area where this isn't a prevalent theme of people for people that to go to the metaphysical store and learn to be do intuitive development. So, right there, just not to have that to go in, I would think you would want to say, oh, two things pop in is that, for the first time in your life, you're around people who understand the way you're wired and they're doing the same thing. That's cause for celebration. And then the second thing is, please let me know that I'm doing this the right way.
Yeah, I know. So what we learned a lot from her. I don't mean to disparage her at all. She's a wonderful
no.
medium. It's just we felt that we weren't getting that, wow factor that we needed. So we created our own group. We called ourselves the Seekers. And we went to the owner of that metaphysical store and we said, we really want to create a group of community. We didn't want like a teacher. We wanted it to be like a group feeling. And we said, could you, email this out to other people? And she said, sure, that'll be $75. I'll never forget that. Like we had to pay to email something out. But so we sent out this email to all of the people on her mailing list and we met at a restaurant. And I don't know, we had a lot, maybe 24 people showed up the first time. And we decided that we would meet in someone's home every month. And whoever took that month, they would have to research a topic and present on it. And so we did that for about 1.5 years. It was great. We ended up with a core group of like 9 to 12 people, which I thought was really good. And every time it was my turn to host, I would teach about crystals. So everybody started calling me the crystal chick. And so that kind of stuck. Then I started, so while I'm doing this, so I'm going to these classes every other Friday at the metaphysical store. I'm helping to co-host this Seekers group. I'm also taking classes in anything I can. I mean, I was driving all over the state for workshops on crystals and auras and everything else. And I started taking these classes that Deb Bowen, my co-host of Psychic Teachers, was teaching called about Tarot, working with Tarot. And it was an intensive, like 8-week class in her home that met every week. And I started learning Tarot. And Deb and I became really good friends. And she does this thing once a year at this old plantation. She does readings for their Halloween festival. She's done it for like 32 years. And she calls herself Madame Deborah. And it's just her thing. And hundreds of people come to see her. And it's really, really fun. And so this one weekend, she couldn't do it. And she asked me to do a reading for her. Like, she was very professional. She was like, I think you're the real deal, but I need to make sure. So I did a reading for her. I was very scared. And she liked it. And so she said, will you fill in for me for this weekend? And I was super honored that she asked, but I had never done an actual reading before. It was all had been classes. And I did not know what to expect. And these readings, they put you in the old slave cabins of the southern plantation. And you're in this room. You get there, like I got there at 4:00. I was there Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. All 3 nights, I did not leave before 1 a.m. I had lines out the door of people just coming to see me. And I was getting these mediumship hits like I'd never gotten in my life. Like I was not reading the cards. I was hired to do card readings. And I was not doing card readings. Now, the whole time, the African-American woman who had lived in that cabin was sitting on the bed, like next to my little desk. Like I could see her out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't see her when I looked at the bed. But she was so nice and so kind and so protective. And I don't know if she held some type of sacred space or what, because I have since done reading nights like that where I do readings back to back. And I don't know about you, Denise, but after like the 5th or 6th mediumship reading, I start to get fuzzy. Like I get tired. I can't focus. I'm not good.
And that's, yes, because I do a lot of the full days. I still do that. And I have to, when I get to that point, I always reconnect with my guide and say, I need you to step in, and I'll say, please give me the strength to get through this. And I kind of go on autopilot, and then they keep downloading, and it keeps coming. But it is physically, mentally, and emotionally, and even spiritually such an intensity to do readings back to back like that. You know what I think is fabulous in all of this too? If someone, how short a time frame all of this happened for you, as far as from the dreams from George to the incident, the horrific accident for your husband. If someone had told you at the beginning of that, oh, by the way, in a few years you're going to be sitting in a on a plantation doing readings for lines and lines of people, you would have just looked at them and thought, okay, well, they're coming for you soon. You just be patient, because there's no way. There's no way you could have believed that that was going to be. And also to put yourself out there and in a monthly meeting as someone who is, from what you've shared, you're more shy, you're more introverted. That's so out of character. So huge, and to have these groups in your home, you went from 0 to 60 so quickly. It's very, very, which again points to me that you truly you're doing this because you came to do the work. It's not that you chose this; they chose you.
Wow, that sounds so nice. It never felt that way. Like it always felt
No,
very
but it
overwhelming and scary and exciting.
but right. But the fact that it's so, I mean, oh my goodness, girl! If the fact that it fell into place and everything is just this huge, what I'm seeing are these big, huge stones across a river, like, okay, step here, step here, step here, and it was all progressive, and one thing led to the next so smoothly. And I'm sure at the time it didn't feel that it
No, you're
did,
right.
but
Hindsight. That's why I always will tell, like listeners to my Psychic Teachers podcast will always say, I want to open up too. What do I do? And I'll always say, all you have to do is say yes. Because I
right.
feel like when I was on my knees in that chapel in the hospital saying, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. But you have to make him live and you have to show me how to do it. I feel like I did strike some type of bargain that night.
But I also love the fact that Deb became a catalyst. She showed up in your life
Yes.
as one of these people who, she's like, no, I need you to, you're ready, you can do this, and handed you that. Whereas, my friend who had said, no, I want you to come to this gathering and do readings, very similar situation of, we're going to help you step out and realize that it's okay to do this and that you can do
Yes.
this.
Yeah, and I think it's true. You have to look for those teachers in your life, however they show up. Or those catalysts, is another good word.
Right. But and I think part of that too, though, is honoring that, because the people that you've mentioned on a level that they resonated with the way they felt right. They felt like you needed to be there, even if And I think right now, when there's so much information, so many classes, so many people that are, follow me, follow me. If it doesn't feel right, then that's not the person you need to
Yes,
work
you have
with.
to honor that.
And I think that's
Yeah,
so
I agree.
important.
So after I did the readings at the plantation that night, I did get a lot of confidence from that. I did, and I remember what I did was I went to the metaphysical store, was having this guest psychic in town who was a teacher, an actual school teacher like us, and was a Catholic. And I thought, oh my gosh, like she'd be the perfect person to read for me. So I signed up to go see her, and she gave me an okay reading. When people give you a good reading, but it could kind of fit. It's like a horoscope. It could kind of fit for 20 people. It was kind of one of those readings.
Right.
And I was like, okay, thank you. And I stood up and I said, I really feel like I'm opening up to this world myself. Do you see me doing readings like you're doing? And she said, no, honey, absolutely not. That did not come up in the cards. And I was like, oh, okay. So I walk out to the owner of the metaphysical store and I sat down next to her and I was like, well, that was disappointing. And she said, why? And I told her, and she said, you like psychometry when you come to those classes, right? And I said, yeah. And so she gave me a piece of her jewelry and she was like, read me. So I did a reading for her and some of her people came through and she was like, Samantha, you've got something. You need to do this. And she said, you can work here if you want. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And so I wrote down my email address and my phone number and I said, you know what? it's the whole money thing. Like having people spend their hard-earned money and something might come through and something might not really freaks me out. I said, why don't you just give my number and name out for anyone who wants to do a free reading and tell them I'm new and I'm practicing. And so for the rest of 2006 and into the early part of 2007 for that year, I just did free readings and random people would just call me up on the phone and they would leave an object of theirs at the store or just their signature and I would pick it up. I would take it home. I would meditate holding their object and I would write down pages of notes and then I would call them while holding their object and do a reading. And then I would drive their object back to the metaphysical store and drop it off. It was so weird the way I worked. But anyway, so that's how I got started. And then after that year, I started doing readings part-time at the metaphysical store and teaching part-time at the community college. And my department chair's dad passed away during that time, right at the beginning of 2008. And he came through very quickly, like within a month of his passing. And I was able to give her some messages. And she was like really floored. It really, really helped her. And she started getting into this stuff and reading all about it. And so anyway, at the end of the spring semester, I go to her for my fall schedule, as you do. And she hands me a blank sheet of paper.
Right.
And my heart started pounding and I said, am I fired? Like, I'm kind of a good teacher. Why are you firing me? And she said, I'm not firing you. I'm giving you your wings. I said, what do you mean? And she said, Samantha, you really helped me with that message. Like, God has given you something. You need to use it. And she said, I want you to do this work full time. If it doesn't work out, the door here is always open. But give yourself one semester to try this. So I got my own little office above a yoga studio, and on August 8th, 2008, because I wanted the triple eights, I started this full time and did it ever since.
Oh my goodness. So literally from start to finish, we're looking at maybe a 5-year period?
Yeah, really, probably 3 years, 3 or 4 years.
3 years. Which is incredible. It's absolutely incredible, but also so serendipitous that it all worked into the right direction of this is what you need to be doing. It would have been really hard to say, nah, I don't think so.
But I'll tell you, like in that time, in that whole time, my kids, I had 3 kids in 4 years. So I had really, really young kids. So I'm sure that's part of it. But I also didn't watch TV or read books. I didn't keep up with the news. Like I was hyper focused on this. It was like you said, like somebody flipped a switch and I just kind of boom, 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 jumped in.
And I think that, doing and I did the same thing. I gave away I didn't charge for readings for years, and it was a friend of mine who said, you're good. You need to charge for this, and I was like, I can't take people's money for this. This just is something I love to do. But I think doing that time, that's another aspect of being of service, and even to this. I still always, so many times a month, I gift readings or gift sessions with people because I think it's important to make sure that we continue to give back and help people. That's the bottom line.
I agree, 100%.
So this is, so now, do you have, what, it feels like you've evolved through all of this, and I have had the pleasure of meeting you face to face, and I have to agree with the person you met with who said you do emanate a light. You do. You have a very peaceful, you're very, very safe, people feel comfortable with you, and also you are an incredible conduit of divine. It just flows through you beautifully. And I'm not saying that as an ego-based thing. I'm saying it as, energetically, you're in the right place doing the right thing. Is there something else you'd like to expand with your work from where you are now, or
you mean like what do I want to focus on now?
Right, and I think that's important because I was thinking about this earlier, that this is a topic and a subject and a lifestyle that you never reach the end of the road. It always evolves to another level. There's always something else to learn or experience or vibrate or however you want to look at it. It's like, oh, okay, I have a master's degree in this, I'm good. There's always
And that's
something
what's
new.
so exciting. Yeah, I am studying and learning a lot of new things for me, for my own personal growth. But professionally, what I really want to focus on is writing and teaching other people how to do this for themselves, how to awaken to their own intuition. Not necessarily so that they can become readers too, because that's not for everybody, but so that everybody can understand what really matters in life. You know, I opened up to my abilities during a very dark period where my ex-husband was shot, but also I opened up during a miraculous period where I gave birth to my third little angel girl, Chloe. And since that time, it's not like there's no such thing as like happy ever after. You know what I'm saying? Like I've had some really dark times since, and I've had some really wonderful times since. But I went through breast cancer. I went through a divorce. Like, a lot of difficult things have happened to me in the years since I've opened, and I've never sunk down to a depression or a state of malaise or a state of why me. And I really feel it's because I was opened and awakened to this other world that exists right here around us. And it sustains me and it supports me and it gives me so much sense of purpose that my passion now is really getting people to see that in their own lives so that when they go, because, look, C.S. Lewis said, this world is suffering. Like it's a world of duality. In order for there to be light, there must be darkness. So we are going to have amazing, wonderful times, but we're also going to have awful, dark times as well. And so opening up to this and learning how to manifest and learning how to get in touch with your purpose isn't about it's not like, oh, the end game is great, no more pain for me. No, it's about learning
No,
how to be in that moment of pain and still understand the miracles in that.
and it's empowering people. It's empowering people to step into their own, to honor their own light and the light within others, to come together as community. And I agree with you 100%. I think that that's the tipping point we're at. Are people going to start to honor their heart and their path and step into that place of being true so that we can counteract the dark that is, because there is a polarity right now and an intensity to that that's never been experienced before on this
I
planet, I
agree.
don't
And
think.
I want more
So,
people to think about their death. I know that doesn't sound like a very optimistic thing to say, but hear me out. I really want people to think about what what legacy, are you leaving in this world? Do you know what I'm saying? Like
right.
I
And
have
I
go ahead.
exactly. I'll say to people when a lot of times during readings, and I say it to myself, when I get to the end of the road and look back, is this a time in my life that I'll regret that I didn't take this step or that I didn't make this choice? And that also makes it just, death becomes a transition, not an end.
Exactly. Well, like take my father, who I mentioned before. My dad does love the classics. I mean, he is a true intellectual, but he spent his life working in advertising and hated it every day. Hated his job and was really good at it. And he made a lot of money and he provided a really good upbringing for us. And that is honorable. That is something at the end of his life to look back on and pat himself on the back for, right? But at the same time, my
Right.
dad will sit there and he'll say to you, my two biggest clients were RJ Reynolds and Dunkin' Donuts. And he always says, I spent 30 years encouraging people to eat donuts and smoke cigarettes. And he said if he could do it all over again, oh, I never thought of this with you, Denise. He said I would teach at a small college in Maine. Yeah, he said if he could do it all over
Oh,
again, he would teach
oh
English at a small
my.
college in Maine. And I think I look at him sometimes and I think, I mean, yes, he had a lovely life and he's been able to travel and do wonderful things because of the money he was able to make doing advertising. But I don't know if it was always a life of joy because I don't know that he ever lived his true purpose. He always wanted to be a teacher. He always wanted to just sit and read. And
And that's part of this as well, is when you do step into your own as an empath, as a sensitive, and learn how to manage it, how to accept it, how to enjoy it, it does bring that sense of joy into your everyday
yes,
life. and allows you to make different
Yes,
choices.
exactly. And so I'm just saying that my passion now is getting people just to look at themselves differently, look at their choices differently, and just think about their life in a new light through the eyes of, oh my gosh, there really is something more, and I can be a part of it.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. And believe it or not, we made it through another hour, which
I
went by
did.
really, really
Thank you, everybody, for
fast.
letting me ramble.
Samantha, thank you. Oh, no, no. Thank you for sharing and being so open and direct and allowing us to peek into your world a little bit, because I think it was very inspiring and also helps people to realize that they'll get through their stuff too and it's going to be okay. On Samantha is samanthafay.com. She's absolutely fabulous if you need a reading. Denise, and it's thegratefulmessenger.com. On our next show, we'll be talking about cord cutting and different techniques, and also bringing in some new research on that topic. So
Me
very much
too.
looking
Me
forward
too.
to
We're going to
that.
try to take cord
So,
cutting beyond imagine a cord and imagine you cutting it. We're going to try to talk about really different out of the box techniques you can do to effectively manage your energy.
and what to keep and what to let go of. It's huge. So thank you so very much. This
Thank
has been a
you. I
pleasure.
hope everybody has a great week. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye bye. Take care.